Hello. Now, I don't usually offer book reviews on this channel. It's just something I haven't got around to, I suppose. I might do in time. But one that I thought I would comment on is this wonderful book, The Transgender Issue, written by the trans activist and former, well, I think she still is, a lawyer, Shon Faye. This is a book that's now 3 or 4 years old since it was first published. Penguin described as a landmark bestseller. Now, it deserves to be. It's an incredibly well-researched book, looking at pretty much, I think, all aspects of the social conundrum where the trans debate presents itself. So that comes in many different fields, in academia, in education, in terms of race and community relationships. And of course, it comes down to some of the big issues that feature very often in this debate around safe spaces and so on. She particularly talks about the disadvantaged in society, perhaps those of a lower class, as we still very often distinguish people to be, sadly, in my country, in the UK, or due to racism, their education, their backgrounds, and so on, and the differential opportunities that presents. And what I love about this book is she does offer enormous detail. It's incredibly well researched, and therefore can't be accused of presenting kind of just sound bites or opinions, really, that are taken out of context. So, as an example, on the issue of the argument around prisons being places where trans people, in the view of the trans critical, shouldn't go, and indeed that seems to be where governments are going at the moment in terms of policy, and in this country at least. She gives a lot of the context and the background around the well-quoted case there in I think it was a Scottish prison, and points out actually that there are male prison officers, indeed one in the very same prison, who was accused of abuse as well, of harassment as well, of the female prisoners. She talks a lot about the debate that the transcritical put forward, and very, very strongly is on the opposite view. But what I like is that she does present that debate, and she does trace the history from Stonewall and earlier, and yeah, gives a good articulate argument against some of the positions put forward there. Some of it's going to remain philosophical, like this big question of what is a woman, of course. And I have to say, I didn't necessarily find myself reaching the same conclusions, or at least as strongly reaching the same conclusions as Shon does in some places. But that doesn't detract from this being an incredibly thoughtful book for anybody that really wants to get a real handle on the detail of this issue. As I say, it's very helpful for me in the level of depth that she has researched this, and the number of anecdotes and stories that she presents really is something in itself to be grateful for. So it's definitely a book that I would recommend. It's opened some new questions for me. She does consider the situation of trans men as well as trans women, and indeed in a rather interesting context there in terms of how they may or may not be accepted by trans critical feminists. So for those of us who are open to what this debate is all about, and I think this book is intended really for a general audience and also for politicians and policymakers. That's very much where it sits within the publisher's category, genre where it's published, which is around politics and policy making. So an important book for anybody really who's trying to get a bit of a handle on this issue. particularly focused on what's going on in the UK. That's where her interest is, where Shon is based, but much more widely as well. Do get hold of a copy if you can.